All right, welcome to the Stampscapes lab. I have a show and tell here for you, featuring this one reflection card using a piece of the Deanna Tubb-Sedillo background papers and a piece of the holographic cardstock. Okay, so this piece right here was created using, for the most part, components. There's a little bit of stamping directly onto the papers on here, but for the most part, these are component pieces that have been stamped and cut out and placed over the top of these papers, okay, which we have to do with certain types of backgrounds. Okay, so first of all, this is a background paper right here, and it goes, it's the full sheet of paper. But I wanted to have these rocks stamped or placed onto one of the Deanna's really cool backgrounds. But if I stamped it directly on here to have all that green showing right through there, and it could probably work, but I needed those rocks to stand out a little bit more. So what I did was I stamped my rocks onto a piece of the pretty cool vintage style of paper. This is just some cheap paper that you throw through your, I don't know, inkjet or laser printer, and you can have this kind of weathered, aged type of looking texturing on your pieces. But it's fun to stamp on as well. It's just, again, it's just real cheap paper. You can pick up a pack of, I don't know, 5 different patterns for really an inexpensive price. Okay, but what I did was, see how it's got this, it has this vignette around the perimeter usually on these types of papers, and I wanted it darker at the base of the rock, so I stamped it with this darker portion towards the bottom, okay? Now that goes the same for this rock cluster on the holographic. There are ways to stamp this directly onto the holographic, and I can block it out with white and then stamp over it in black and then get rid of some of that excess white that's on there. You have to use the Brilliance white pigment ink because it's a water-based ink that will dry on this type of metallic cardstock here. It won't adhere though, so you'd have to spray seal it. And I didn't want to do that because you lose some of the vibrancy of the holographic when you do it. It turns into more of a frosted look, and it works, and I do use that technique at times, but I just didn't feel like doing it on here. Okay, so that being said, these rocks are placed directly onto the background up top, and this lower portion foreground down below. But before I adhered the rocks onto these two surfaces, what I did was I stamped out my leaves stamp directly onto the paper and with StazOn ink onto the holographic right here. Okay, and then what I did was I adhered my rocks. I use a spray adhesive, so I spray the back of these rocks, and then I adhered it right on here and down here. And then what I did was, after I got these two rocks positioned, what I did was I stamped this girl. I didn't know what figure I was going to use on her, but I figured she would be really good with the moon. So I stamped her onto a piece of white cardstock, and then I colored it and cut her out. And then I placed her right here on the rock, and so that she would reflect down here. And then I figured out where she was going to go. And then with some of my new candle, floating candle images from one of the new sets, I used this one and this one right here. I didn't just do the cluster of 3 though. Sometimes I just stamped out just this one candle individually and these 2 up top here separately. And I looked where my different components were going to go. I had already had it pre-stamped a moon out, so I kind of positioned it roughly right here. So I could see where it's going to reflect down here. Okay, so that being said, I have these floating candles in here, but I didn't want them to cover up the reflected portions of important areas. So in other words, I don't want to put a big candle right over the top of my moon, like such as this one right here. So I put my larger candle down here and a couple smaller ones up here. If one kind of goes across my moon a little bit, just for, I don't know, whatever extra drama. But I don't want to cover up something like the lady's face with a candle or something like that. So I have 2 right here, 3 right here. So they're kind of framing off some of the more important reflective elements down below. Okay, now I stamped out those candles down here in StazOn ink, all right, along with the Tiny Rocks Small. I like to create some of that texturing around my images, my floating images, when I do these types of reflection cards. And then I thought about it, and I thought about just, I don't know, coloring in some of these with some white paint pen or something like that for the candles. But I thought, okay, let's just go all out on here. So this is on, I stamped that one out on a glow-in-the-dark printable vinyl with Brilliance ink. Okay, Brilliance is a water-based pigmenting, so it stamps really nicely onto printable vinyl. An oil-based pigmenting is not going to work on this. Okay, it might not dry. You can test it out, but it's that type of vinyl is meant for water-based media. And then I also stamped out my candles onto that, and then I cut them out. Now, you don't have to cut them out perfectly, because if you undercut a little bit, you're placing those, what ends up being stickers after you cut them out, right over the top of what you've already stamped out down there, okay? So if you undercut a little bit, the image is already stamped out there, so it will extend out to any portion that you I don't know, whatever, miscut. So don't think about it being too much of a hassle to cut those out like that. So those are all placed down there. And I thought it would add an extra little kind of dynamic touch to the dim, the dim light or no light scenario for viewing this piece. So what we'll do right here is we'll show you what this looks like. With the lights on and off like that. But again, I think that's a really fun type of, kind of methodology for the utilization of some really super dynamic styles of paper, that might not be easy to stamp on, but you can turn all of your stamp images, not necessarily into stickers. I did put, spray adhesive on the back of this, to glue it down. But it's really a good way to use that type of super loud paper with your stamped imagery. And I think it makes for a really good combination. And I looked around. I thought the greens for this one is kind of more of a greenish, yellowish tinged holographic. It comes in several different colors there, but I thought that paired really nicely with Deanna's cool background paper up above. So this is what it looks like with the lights on, and we'll show you what it looks like with the lights off. Okay, there's a little bit of lighting in my room, but my camera's really compensating for a lot of the lack of light. But you can really see how the glow-in-the-dark vinyl works in these reflection cards. It makes for a pretty dynamic, kind of presentation, and an extra little type of perk for using it. So I think the card looks pretty cool in light, but I think it looks kind of extra dynamic in the dark at times. Let me see if I can change my exposure here. Let's go to that like that. So really fun, you give this card to someone and they can really enjoy it in a couple different types of looks, or multiples. It's really dynamic in terms of the holographic in regular light, but then it looks really different in the dark too. So it's kind of one of those things when you use holographics like that. or any light, any type of surface where light can influence it, it becomes kind of a card of, or a visual of, a lot of different personalities. Okay, anyways, if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section, and thanks so much for watching.